All right, welcome to Friday, everybody. Woohoo! All right, another week, and this kind of wraps up our introduction. Right, we're into the rhythm, the swing of school again, and we are learning about Canvas. You're turning some work in. Today, you're going to be introduced to how we write up a lot of our experiments. We're going to write on PDF files using Notability, but you're also going to do your data tables and your charts using the Numbers app. Sometimes Google Slides, sometimes Google Sheets, sometimes Microsoft. So it doesn't matter if you use Apple, Google, or Microsoft's apps. They all have word processing, they all have spreadsheets and presentations. So once you are good at all of those tools, you can switch between different companies and they all do the same thing, different menu options. Sometimes also on my computer with the web version of things, it's a little different than the iOS version. So you just have to get comfortable with where the menu is to accomplish your task. So we're going to spend some time going over a practice with making data tables and charts, and then we're going to get to the actual exercise, the homework, and I'll help you set that up. Then it shouldn't take long to complete that. You're going to combine your data table and charts from one app, and you're going to merge it together into a write-up using Notability. So that's kind of what we do a lot here for our lab write-ups. Before we get to that, though, let's do a review of the remainder of the identifying the variables in an experiment. That was your homework due last night. So can you open that up? I'm going to ask you questions about it. Then we'll get to the charting. We did the first two together, right? On the last class. So we left off with Homer, right? We finished that. The coconut juice didn't work. The goal of this exercise right here is to identify the three types of variables in every experiment. That is the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the control variable. You have to have all three of those, otherwise you do not have a valid experiment. Without a control, you can't rely on the data. So you should be able to spot these. See if I can go over to our assignment real quick and show you this. Yesterday during office hour, I thought it was cool. Somebody showed this to me for the first time. I think it's new in Canvas. It tells you what your grade is right there on the icon itself. For example, from your dashboard, if you turn this on, it will show you your grade right here. And that's a toggle switch that you can set. I think that's great for you to turn that on. It would be a reminder of where you stand in the class. I'll just tell you, winners keep score, and people that fall behind in a game, they minimize what the score is. So you really want to stay on top of it from the beginning of a semester. And I can tell you from years of experience with students, if you have an A in the first month and you keep that A in the second month, you'll probably end up with an A at the end of the year. But those who, there's already students that have not turned anything in yet, and it's not because they're transferring, it's just that they just don't make it a priority. So I think the score that you have right now, it's a reminder of, yeah, I just got to keep turning in my work. staying on top of my assignments. Some students have a paper calendar and they write down their assignments somewhere other than just here in a to-do list in Canvas, because you have to go look for this information. If you're carrying this around, it's more visual. It's right there in front of you at all times. So turn on your grade for your classes so that you can see your grades. That's pretty cool. I'm going to go over here to the module and just zoom over here to the assignment because I want to show you this picture. If this wasn't clear to you yet about these three variables, here's that silly experiment, and it's about a silliness with an alien and eyeballs. So the problem is, or the question for the lab, does boiling time affect the size of an alien eyeball? So they're going to run through an experiment with the three types of variables, and the independent variable is labeled over here as the one that you are going to change in the experiment. I like to just say, hey, it's the one you're testing. How are you going to keep track of independent versus dependent? Independence means by yourself. If you're independent, nobody's going to tell you what to do. You get to choose it. So imagine if you are running the experiment, you can do whatever you want. You just have to pick only one thing to test. A good experiment only tests one thing at a time. So in this case, it's the amount of time that you're boiling the eyeball. So you should maybe have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. So that's what a variable means. It's varying it. Small, medium, and large, right? You're gonna have like a range of how you are applying that. So when we go through our exercise, you should realize that sometimes that's missing. Sometimes they just do one thing. But you should have a variation in what you are testing. So independent variable is always what you are choosing to do. The dependent variable is what you're measuring. And we learned with Jane Goodall that it doesn't have to be a number, right? Sure, they might count the number of chimpanzees in the area, the number of times they're using that little fishing rod to go get termites. So they could record some numbers, but often it's just descriptions. What do you call data that is not a number? Numbers are quantity. And what do you call data that isn't a number? What? Qualitative data. Qualitative. Quality of data. Describing the behaviors. Wasn't that touching? It's a sad thing for the chimpanzee to lose her 2 babies, right? Then she was grief-stricken and just left the whole family and went off by herself to grieve. Came back 3 days later. Really odd behavior for a chimpanzee, and she was crying. She was missing her mother and she was missing her babies, right? So you would write that down, like you just can tell the grief, and you would write down your observations. So data is either just describing things, like do you see green slime for Homer in the shower during that coconut experiment? So what you measure is called the dependent variable, and it depends on what you have set for your experiment. So that's why it's called the dependent variable. And you always need a control. A control is leave one alone so that you always know what it looked like to start with. So in this case, you're going to put an eyeball and not heat it. Well, you want to leave everything else the same because they were all in water, right? So now it has to be in water because maybe just the water and not boiling swells it up. So you always need to keep a constant. Don't manipulate one of them with the independent variable and then use it as a comparison at the end. So those are the three variables. The independent variable is going to go on the first column in a data table, and the dependent variable becomes all the data inside the table. So we're going to be working on that. Okay, let's zoom over to the assignment, and we will go over here to Bart. I like this one. Radioactive mice. So Bart believes that if he exposes mice to radio waves, they're going to become extra strong. He was reading too much about Radioactive Man. So to make his mice radioactive, he's going to put them next to a radio and just have them listen to music for 10 hours. And then see if they are going to get strong. He's going to measure the strength by having them push a block of wood out of the way. Maybe they're in a maze, and in order to get from where they are to like their food, they have to push a block out of the way. So he does that. The radioactive mice, 8 could push the block away, and the group that he's comparing it to, only 7 out of 10 could push the block away. So what is the independent variable, Cassidy? The what? The different mice?
No, the first group of mice that was
What is he testing?
like to see if they become stronger.
Stronger after doing what?
Listening to music with the radio.
Right. So the independent variable is the radio. Having them listen to the music or not. And in this case, he just did it for 5 hours. No variation, just no sound and 5 hours worth. What's the dependent variable, Kyson?
Some mice that were exposed to radio waves.
The dependent variable is data. So what is he collecting?
Just the mice that like push the block.
Right. Yep, whether they could push the block, counting it. So here we have 8 and 7. So that is your quantitative data. That's the dependent variable. Dependent variable is always your data, what you're measuring. And the control group. Preston.
The mice that are not exposed to the radio?
Yeah.
The 7 out of 10 mice?
Correct. He had a control group. So I wasn't showing this so that I could hear from you guys. So the conclusion is, yeah, one more mouse could push the block. Is that significant? On one hand, it doesn't seem like it. Just 1 more out of 10? No big deal. And do you see right here, I said with a small sample size, this is not a significant change. You know, data is not very good if you have just a little bit of it. If you were talking to your friend about you doing this, they'd be like, really? Like, you only did 10 times and you're going to make this big claim like your mice are strong and you just did, maybe it was just randomness. So what could you do to improve this? Somebody in another class said, hey, run it again. Now you have 20. Switch up the groups, right? Make the control group now your experimental group and vice versa. So you really don't have much data. But let's say that you're in the business of helping bodybuilders or football players get stronger. And you had a product and you would say, yeah, drink this protein powder or whatever, and it's going to make you 10 times stronger. Doesn't that sound like a pretty good increase? 10%? So that's what we have here. 1 more, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 10 more, that's 10%. So if that was a large sample size, that is significant. So just be aware of when you look at someone stating the results, let it pass through your obvious filter. Like, does this make sense? The claim that they're making, sure, on the surface it's good science, it's got all three variables, but they're kind of manipulating the results. You can't just say the results. Like if you had two mice and one of them, the radioactive, you could say 50% stronger, so you really have to watch your statistics. You have to have large sample sizes. Do you have a question?
Yeah, if you make changes, can we resubmit it, or like was going to be taken off because it would be
Don't worry about it for this assignment. And if you were to do that, it's 10% per day. So if you're just going for another point, it wouldn't be worth it. But if you don't do well on an assignment, early on in the semester, I'll work with you to build up better study skills and better quality of work. So that's what we talked about, right? Different animals maybe instead of mice? Another measure of strength maybe besides pushing a block? How about the length of time for the radio waves? We just had 5 hours, maybe 1 hour would be good, 2 hours. So you kind of get the idea. All right, next question. We have Krusty the Clown, and he's got itching powder, but his friend tells him, hey, I've got a powder that makes the itches last twice as long, and this is part of your gag, It makes people laugh when you're itching, so try it out. He's got one subject that is going to use the original itching powder and a second one using the new and improved itching powder. So the results are, yeah, it increased the itches by 15 minutes. What is the independent variable? Haley?
Oh, I said the independent variable was the new itching powder.
Yep, but it's all itching powders. It's the original itching powder and the new itching powder. So itching powder is the variable. It's not just the new one. Aren't we varying the itching powders? So you could have 10 different itching powders. All of them are the independent variable. What is the dependent variable? What do you got for that, Angelina? Angeline, right?
How long did itching last?
Right, time of itching. That's the dependent variable. So we're measuring quantitative data. And then next up, do they have a control? Ethan, is there a control? Not technically, right? Because all itching powders are the independent variable. And so the control would be someone without any itching powder. But I could see where you're saying the control is the original itching powder. But all in all, there is no control here, because what if it's the clown's clothing that makes you itchy? It might be a fabric on their clown shirt that is making you a little itchy. It's just something to think about, that a control means that you do not apply the independent variable to it. So you know how to figure out percentages? It's the change divided by the original. So up on the board here, the change was 15 minutes. It went from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. So that's 15-minute increase divided by your original start. So 15 divided by 30, 50%. That's pretty significant, again, but this is just a one trial. So the sample size is way too small, so you have to be aware of the claims that they make when you don't have a good amount of data. It could be the randomness, it could be an outlier. If you had 1,000 samples and most of them were 45 minutes and then one was 0 or one was 3 hours of itching, you know, you're always going to have outliers that don't fit the average. So if you have a small sample size, you could be looking at an outlier. And then the last one here is a good one. You have to design the experiment. Somebody during office hours said, so am I supposed to run this and like make up data and then report on that? And I said, doesn't it say design? So that's all you have to do. You just have to set it up like here's how you would run it, but you're not going to make up data. So in order to design an experiment, you need to say what the 3 variables are. So the independent variable is already told to you right here. Her task is to answer the question, does this commercial hair product Raguti affect the speed of hair growth? Makes your hair grow faster. So the 2 variables are already given to you, right? The independent variable is the hair product. The dependent variable is the speed of your hair growth, so you're going to record quantitative data. So it's up to you to now say what the control is and the procedure of using this. What do you got? It's Dupree, right? Or Dupre?
Yeah, free.
Okay.
She can use the glue or whatever on her brother and then do nothing on her mom's hair. And
Okay.
wait a couple weeks and see who's supposed
All right, so the family members, whoever, you know, there's 5 family members or so, so you're going to set one aside as the control and another is the experimental person. And you're going to apply the product on the experimental person for a week, and then you're measuring how fast their hair grows. So you just measure how long their hair was over a certain period of time, so that's your procedure. Okay, anybody else have a different way of doing this?
I did Homer and Bart because Homer doesn't have hair.
Yeah.
So I used him instead.
So one was a control and,
Homer was the control and Bart was
okay. In an experiment, you need to keep everything else the same except for the hair product. So if your control person is different, if they're older, you could do the grandparents and you could do Maggie, right? The little baby. So right there, they're different. So you have to kind of think, yeah, but if he's already bald, his hair isn't growing anyway, so are we skewing the results? So there's a better way of setting up this experiment. Anybody get it? Anybody have a different approach than using different people for the control? There is a way of making all 5 family members both the experimental group and the control group at the same time. So you take away using different people for the control. Because even back at that mouse one, I would want to look at it. Are you choosing bigger, stronger mice to begin with? And then your control group are the little runts of the group of mice, right? So you really want to keep your control very much alike to your experimental group. Everybody get the obvious? Here's an example. Sometimes we're walking down the mall, my wife and I, and people are trying to get them to come into their store, especially hair and lotions. And they stand there, hey, can I put this on you? Like, you ever hear that, right? You're walking by and they want to put like eye cream on you, like, hey, this will really help. And then once somebody actually like, she agreed or they were too fast, they put it on her, like, geez, now you walk around with like one side of your face is like acting different than the other side of your face. Did that give you a hint on how to set this up? Yeah?
Do like half and half.
Right. Shave your head, apply the product on one side of your head. Now you're walking around as a control over here and the experimental group over here. And now you're not making time a variable inside of your experiment because the time is the same. Did you know that your hair grows differently in different seasons, in different temperatures? Your hair is going to grow faster based on the diet that you have. Your hair is made out of proteins. So if you would be the control for like the first month, now you'd have to do everything exactly the same. But now you have the calendar to contend with, and that's not the same. So you have to be careful about running an experiment and keeping everything the same except for your independent variable. That's why most experiments are done in a lab where you control everything. The lighting, the wind, the temperature, the radio waves, everything's got to be the same. So that's what we got here, just for you to look at this. IV, independent variable. We knew that was the hair growth. Dependent variable, speed of hair growth. So your control could be, and your subjects could be any of these family members. And I think the best experiment is to use the same person as both the control and the experimental group. And it doesn't matter if it's a week or a month, but everyone is both the control and the experimental. So that would be the way to minimize adding all these other variables to your experiment. Okay. Let's now go to our next activity, and that is, I'm going to display this information up on the screen so you don't have to go over here, but I'm going to show you that charting practice files. So this is where we're getting our practice stuff. So notice that the module contains things that we do in class, not just assignments. So what we're going to do is recreate this data table using the Numbers app. So I just want to tell you that data tables also need attention to detail. I'll tell you some good things about this and some things that are completely off track. What I like is that it's neat, it's typed, it has a really good title. Every data table needs a title. If you don't have a title, the data table can't make sense to someone not knowing what it's supposed to contain. So if I didn't have calories burned in 30 minutes and you're looking at 60 calories, 77 calories, like, yeah, so without the title up at the top, the numbers don't make sense. So don't forget to always have a title. Then you also have nice bold headings on every column to tell you what the data stands for. So body mass in kilograms. It could have been pounds. Biking, basketball, watching TV. These are 3 different experiments, and they're measuring how many calories a person burns doing each of these activities. So the headings are great. The numbers are good, but what stinks here is you don't write the unit of measurement in every cell. Down here, they should only be numbers. This is redundant, and it busies up the table. So you would want to put the unit of measurement right up here in the heading. Kilograms right underneath body mass. So that's the way we're going to set this up. So I'm going to have you now open up your Numbers app. Don't do this in Google Sheets. I had somebody saying, hey, I can't follow your menus. Open up the Numbers app. It's a green icon that looks like a bar graph. You can swipe down and type the word numbers if you don't know where it is on your iPad. So I'm going to be switching over to my iPad now.